We'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity podcast. And we're talking to an interesting character, an interesting guy today that I met just a week or so ago. And Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. You have an intriguing background. And so let's give the viewers, the listeners, a little bit of context here.
Okay, well, this could be good or bad. First of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I am the CEO of Real Estate Mergers and Acquisitions, REMA for short, since that's quite the mouthful. I started the company 6 or 7 years ago. It's actually my sixth company.
Mm.
All of them have been sort of centric, let's call it, in the real estate space in one form or another. But REMA came about because of sort of an interaction I had with a broker a long time ago, a number of years ago, who was looking to retire. And it was one of those stories I'd heard 1,000 times. I was in his office chatting away, and it's the typical I'm ready to retire, and the agents are like herding cats, and I just don't know what to do, and I'm getting older, and for the first time, I just said, well, look, let me see what I can do to help you out. And so I called some buddies I knew, and took a long time. He had an incredibly complex business model. It's like his brokerage and 400 agents and title and the whole bit and multiple offices. And it took about a year, but we got him sold. And in the two things that really came out of that interaction was, one is I realized there was really no dedicated M&A companies that were specific for the real estate industry. There was a lot, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting an M&A company in every town across America, but an actual dedicated real estate, M&A was a lot different. And the other thing was the M&A space is damn near as screwed up as the real estate space. So for a guy like me, this was just catnip. I couldn't resist. So I started putting the pieces together, and here we are almost 7 years later, and we've kind of become the leading voice in real estate mergers and acquisitions. So
Yeah, see, this is just fascinating to me. Um, I started investing into real estate when I was 15 years old. So I've been involved in real estate a number of decades now. And it's always fascinated me. Like, as I've seen other industries, CPA accounting firms,
yeah.
they have a process to go ahead and sell their firm. And
Hmm.
for decades, I'm like, how come that's not done in real estate? Like,
Well,
it doesn't make any sense.
yeah, no, the retirement strategy, as far as I can tell in the real estate industry up until us, was keep going until you drop dead face first onto your desk with your martini in your hand, and then that's your retirement strategy. And I'm like, that is a lousy retirement strategy. There has got to be a better way. And what you find out pretty quickly is there's a lot of brokers in this country that are ready to age out. They're ready to be done.
Well, I don't
And
know
you
if you
just got to
know.
give them the information.
Well, I think Tom Coons, what was it, a few years back, he said the average realtor's age is like in the early 60s. I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, but it was a lot older
Yeah,
than what I
so
thought.
if you just look generally speaking across the board, about 50% of the brokers that exist in this country, and let's forget Europe and Canada and all that good stuff, but in America are well into their retirement years. So we'll call it 65 plus. I met with a broker strangely yesterday in Atlanta. I got back late last night, who's well into his 80s. And it's like, dude, seriously, like you've got a really good business here. Let's see what we can do for you, man. It's like you got grandkids, you got like, what's your next steps? And yeah, so anyway.
Well, it's interesting because I had my first conversation with Tom Coons. He's the past president of Century 21
Yeah.
and current executive vice president of Ingo and Volkers Americas. And fascinating guy. First conversation that we ever had, I said, "So Tom, like, what's your life vision? Like, what do you want to accomplish in life?" He says, "I want to change how real estate is done all around the world." I'm like, "Really?" Now this is a guy that's passionate about real estate, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, and Tom, I apologize. It's been 22 years, so I might not have perfect recollection of what we said. So don't, this is what I heard. This is what
Right.
I think I heard
Yeah.
Tom say, but he might not have. So I
Right.
don't want to get him in trouble because maybe he didn't say this. But what I heard him say is, Mark, the real estate industry is all screwed up. People don't know what they're doing.
Hmm.
He's like they don't know how to run a business. I mean, they're all in business for themselves, but they're not like they're not smart business people. They don't
Right.
understand like the average realtor is this and the price, and their profits. They don't like they're not smart business people. He said, I want to
Right.
change that. And I said,
Yeah.
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, no, I mean, most brokers are basically former agents who just went, well, okay, I guess being a broker is the next thing to do. And it's like, well, hang on, stop. No, it's not just the next thing to do. You got to, being an agent is a certain what? A certain thing in life that can get you to some degree of success. Being a broker is a certain thing in life that will most likely bankrupt you if you don't know what you're doing.
See, it was
And it's a horrible way to run an industry. And to Tom's point, yeah, that's my goal as well, is to change the entire industry in how people move from point A to point B to point C to point D and so on, because it's just broken right now.
and it's interesting because years ago, and again, you know, I I never know what to say on podcasts because it's like, I don't, but let's say one of the largest franchises in the country, let's say that, and their largest brokerage, I think it was out in Denver. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of agents. And we got in and started talking to them, and they're like, yeah, we're not profitable. I'm like, how can you go ahead?
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So I think that I have a feeling we'll be doing multiple podcasts on this, um,
I've
because
spent 6 years doing it, man. I tell you, it hasn't ended yet. So
it's like it's like there's a lot of things here. So if
yeah.
you're participating in this, I would encourage you to go ahead and share this with other agents, broker owners, real estate. Like this could be a part, because I think it's interesting because when I got out of college, I had 6 job offers. I have 3 degrees, one in finance, one in management, one in marketing. I had 6 job offers. I took the only one that I knew I didn't want to do. My wife was 3 months pregnant with our first child. We just had bought a house, and I'm like going into 100% straight commission as a loan officer. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking. I made $1 an hour in the first 3 months.
You
like,
must have done a lot of drinking back then, man, because I
like
got
it's like crazy. It's like, the 3 business degrees didn't help
yeah.
a bit, not a bit. Like I'm
Nope.
like, these things aren't helping at all. And so then I started seeing the whole industry, the mortgage, the real
Yeah.
estate. I'm like, man, this is like the Wild West, and everybody's shooting everybody. Nobody knows
Oh
what
yeah.
they're doing. And what's sad is in many ways, things haven't changed in the last, 35, 40 years. It's
Right.
like, it's like it is kind of like the Wild West. So
Yeah.
I think maybe there's 3 things that come to mind for me, but I'd like to hear from you, Mark, on like if you're a broker owner, um, like what would be some tips that you would say that you would give to somebody about thinking about, at some point in the future, you're going to go ahead and you're going to be in a position where you're not going to do that anymore for
Right.
whatever reason. Hopefully
Right.
not dead on your desk, right? That's
That would be
messy.
nice. That would be bullet point number one. Yeah, don't wait until you go face first into your desk. No, look, I think there's 3 obvious ones, and the first 2 are so business centric, and it seems so painfully obvious, I should say, to business centric people, which is, first of all, there is a difference when your CPA says we're gonna help you pay the least amount of taxes possible.
Nice. Yep.
That has nothing to do with what your sellability is worth. And you got to get people to understand that it's a CPA's job to get you to pay the government as little as humanly possible. Great. I am totally for that. But when you're starting to think about now taking that next step and selling, now you have to reverse your thought process. It's not about saving every dollar against the government. It's about retaining every dollar to show that you're valuable. And you have to make that distinction. I'm not saying that someone who just tomorrow maybe hears this podcast and says, wow, I've been thinking about selling and I'm really not prepared, so I shouldn't call. No, my recommendation would be is to pick up the phone and call us or email us or whatever, so we can at least begin talking to you about where can you make those adjustments. So that's number one. That's a big one. Number 2 is real estate agents have a horrible habit of expending far too much money and getting very little returns. ROI is there for a reason, it exists for a reason, and 99% of the businesses use it as a metric to know whether they're making any money. For some reason in the brokerage world and in the title world and the mortgage world, they didn't pick up on that little tidbit of information. So I would say go in and look at your books and like if you're expending, thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on office space that nobody is utilizing, well, here's a thought, get rid of the office space. I mean, again, I go see brokers sometimes, they've got 6,000 square feet in these just high rent districts. And it's like, well, how many of your agents come in here? None. Okay. So in other words, you could go lease a phone booth on the corner for like, 20 square feet for $5 a month. And that would do it too. Yeah. Great. So that would be number one is learn that term ROI, make sure you understand what it means, make sure you can really figure out how to understand where your money's going because you're going to have to show it to the seller or sorry, the buyer at some point. And then maybe number three, which is, a little off the beaten path, which is handing your brokerage over to your children is not a viable solution to your exit strategy. I cannot tell you how many brokers I had said, well, my children want to take over my business. And then you talk to them a year later. Well, yeah, the kids didn't want the real estate business after all. Yeah. And so what I would say is 95% of the time, 92% of the time, whatever, the same brokers who would just swear up and down that the kids are going to take it over. And by the way, even if the kids are in real estate and they go, right, we love being an agent, Dad, but we watched you for the last 30 years kill yourself for little to no money. Why would we want to do, like, sometimes I think the kids are smarter than the parents, type of a thing. But anyway, that's one I hear a lot. And I just go, all right, well, let me know when you're ready to talk because we're here for you. So
Nice. So I love that. And so there's what's in selling your business, there's multipliers. So they said people will ask, well, what's my business worth?
sure.
Well, the bottom line is whatever somebody's willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
But as
Yeah.
a general rule, there's something that's called multipliers. And so,
Sure.
you could take a look. I remember when I got my finance degree, they said it's, and I'm reluctant to say anything because every industry is different. Your marketplace is different. But just what they told me, at college was they said it's kind of 2 times gross or 7 times net, whichever is less.
Yeah. Right now, it's not that.
Okay.
The rule of thumb that we sort of go is, what most people have heard in the real estate industry, brokers anyways, they'll go 3x on EBITDA,
Okay.
which isn't a bad,
Yep.
which isn't a bad way to think about it. Okay, that's fine. But right now, with the industry being the way that it is, we update our multipliers about every month, plus or minus. So what I can tell you is that certain states, particularly the West Coast and the Eastern Seaboard, for example, are far below that. California, I think, is like a 195, 185. I might have that slightly off. And they bottomed out about 6 months ago, maybe a little more, 7 months ago, something like that. And they seem to have been kind of holding there. We actually just this past month had 2 states, strangely, that went up slightly. And when I say slightly, like a quarter point, Texas and Arkansas. I don't know why, but Arkansas
Okay.
for some reason.
Yeah.
So we're kind of watching those Sunbelt states to see if they're starting to make a bit of a rebound. But Texas, Florida, Arizona, kind of held on okay. Call it 285, something in that general range. So generally speaking, to your point, a business is only worth whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. But we also tend to think of it in terms of, structure. So let's say, for example, I'll make a number up. You say your company's worth $1 million. Okay, fine. Then what you've got is what's the structure to earn your way out? Let's say you say your company's worth $1 million, but you actually want 1.5. Well, again, I'm just making these numbers up.
Right.
Well,
Right.
now it becomes an earnout structure. Are there ways to increase your potential earnout over whatever that distance of time is to get you inevitably where you want, but do it in such a way that the buyer can live with that extra
Right.
increase in total cost? And
Right.
that's where the game is played. And that's where us and some notable other groups that do this maybe a little more part-time than we do, that's where we're kind of, I'd say more, what's the right word? More adept at looking at the total picture and how to get what everybody wants.
Right. Right.
The, yeah,
And
sorry, go
this
ahead.
and this is where, as a broker owner, what this means is that your agents, if they're if I was going to say if they're getting older, but they're all getting older. So,
Yeah.
so all your agents, if they're getting to where they're kind of slowing down,
Mm-hmm.
you want to go ahead and have systems in place that they either sell out some other agent comes in, because a business will die. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
garden. If you don't plant, if you don't nurture it, if you don't work it, all of their clients, they're getting older too, and people are dying, but they have kids and grandkids. And if
Right.
you have somebody really working that, and so systems in place. And so in our
Yeah.
next podcast, what we'll do is maybe talk about some tools that are available and some ways of thinking. Typically, I've heard that you want to go ahead and really start redoing your taxes.
Mm-hmm.
As Mark said, 3 years ideally before you sell. So they're often going to look back and say, let's take a look at the last 3 years. And so prior to that, you might have very low income. You're maximizing all your tax write-off. But if you can get, if it's a 3 times multiplier or whatever, you're like, oh, I'm going to get 3 times back whatever I'm showing on the bottom line or whatever that is. And so it makes a whole lot of sense to say, hey, it's a totally different way of thinking than what you've done in the past when you go to sell your business. And so that's good. The ROI too, looking at some of those, Tom's one of his favorite sayings is, know your numbers, like really know your numbers. And so make sure that ideally you're working with an accounting firm, an accounting firm that really helps you in doing those things. And then the most important thing, I think, is going to be, can it run without you? So how do you put systems in place to go ahead and have transition team or something where it's going to continue to go? And if you can have it growing because you have tools and systems in place, that's just going to make it, a whole lot more valuable. And you're going to have more people that are interested in it and being able to do it and get a higher price for it too. Any other kind of closing thoughts or suggestions or tips, Mark, that you have?
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess my only suggestion would be is, to any broker or owner of a company, it doesn't matter really what industry, but obviously we're a niche group, is, to your point, know your numbers. I can't ever stress that enough. I mean, I have far too many brokers and owners that I deal with, and you say, well, what's this? What was your expenditures on X, over the last couple of years? And they look at you with the deer in the headlights, type of a thing, and you're, okay, well, let's start working our way through it. And I never met a broker yet that didn't think they were worth $1 million. And it's a sad day when you have to go, 0 times 3 is still 0. And that's a lousy conversation to have. And I've had to have it, and it's horrible, but that's just the truth. So know your numbers now. So when you come to somebody like us, that you have a realistic expectation of what the next steps are and what your value truly is.
For sure. And what we'll do is, probably right below the podcast, we'll have Mark's information on how you can connect with him. We'll have also probably one of the tools that I'm thinking of is something that's called a business life x-ray. There'll be some information on that. That tool, that system out there has helped a lot of people. It looks at the strengths of your business, weaknesses, looks at 3 dimensions, 9 major areas, 7 systems, looks at what you're doing right, little tweaks you could do to improve, looks at over 40 areas of your business and life. It really gives. It was interesting. Number of years ago, I had a guy actually that had 3 businesses, and he went ahead, and at the end of the review, I had the privilege of doing the review with him. And I said, do you have any questions? And he said, yeah, I'm really ticked off. And I said, wow, okay, what's going on? He said, I wish I'd have known you guys a year ago. I'm like, okay. He said, I paid a outside consulting company over $40,000 to come in and analyze my business. He said, your $285 business x-ray. I learned more from that, Mark, than the $40,000. I said, boy, dang, I wish I'd have known. We could have saved you a lot of money. So there's tools.
Or you could have charged them a lot more, by the way. That would have been.
There's tools out there that will help us to better understand, like, where are the gaps? Like where do we have the weaknesses? It's like a pipeline, and there's 5 pipes. We'll talk about that next time in the next podcast. But we have leaks in our pipes, and if we can identify where those are, we patch those up. We go ahead and get a better system. It's what's called a business operating system. It's the engine. It's a boss system. It's the engine that runs our business. So we earn the money we earn, work the hours we work, have the stress we do or don't have. because of the engine in our business. So hopefully this has been helpful. You'll be able to connect with Mark right below this, or you'll be able to check into some of the other things. And we'll look forward to having you come back and digging a little bit more, opening up that hood and saying, hey, here's some specific things. Most enjoyable. Nice to meet you. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and insight.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it.
You too. Bye-bye.